Hello and welcome to the Sales Code Leadership Podcast. My name's Kevin Teeler. I'm the host of the podcast and the founder of Sales Code. This week, I'm delighted to introduce Joe Curtis. Joe, welcome to the pod. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you, Kevin. How are you?
I'm all good, thank you, sir. I'm all good. Where are you calling in from today? Whereabouts in the world are you?
I'm in Dallas, Texas.
Oh, not been there. I hear it's a great place.
It is great. It is. It's a fantastic place to live, especially raising kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Been on my list of places to go for a little while, so maybe I'll try and find a reason to get on a plane and hop over there. So, Joe, I appreciate you joining. I appreciate you joining the call. I wanted to give you a little bit of an opportunity to intro yourself by way of one of my favorite opening questions, which is, what is it you get paid to do now?
Great. It's an easy one. I run a commercial sales org for a company named Okta. We're the leader in customer and workforce identity. I've got roughly 100 folks on my team, 13 managers, and the rest are account executives.
Okay, 100 people. That's a pretty decent chunk, isn't it? I guess that's not. Is that the whole of Okta sales team in North America, or have you got a portion of it?
No. We've got. I've got a portion of it. So I run the Central and East U.S.
Right.
Number of seconds.
Very nice too. Great. Okay. Challenging job, I'm sure. I know you've been in sales and a variety of sales leadership roles quite a long time, but I'm wondering, is this actually the career that you had in mind at 16?
A SaaS sales leader at 16. I don't even think SaaS was in.
What about sales? Did you want to be in sales when you were 16, Joe?
No, I think what I wanted to do, what I thought I was absolutely destined to do, was to be the GM of the Houston Astros.
Right. That's that for British people, which is a big chunk of the audience. That's a baseball or a basketball team. Basketball.
Baseball.
Oh, I was right the first time.
Oh.
Damn.
So running that team, they have yet to call. But if they do, you never know. I could have a shift in my career. But that was my original.
Are you still playing baseball yourself?
Baseball? No, I retired in the 8th grade.
Did you?
I still play basketball.
You still play basketball, right?
I shouldn't be playing at 45, but I still play.
Yeah, fantastic. So, how did sales happen then? What happened to this career? Was it you were going to be a coach in sports? So what happened?
Backed into it, like a lot of people I know. Know anything about sales? In fact, when I thought about sales, I thought of like a car sales, and I was scared to death of trying to ask people to buy something. But I ran into a company in 2003 in Chicago, and it was a small company in Chicago, and they had put a platform together for high school athletes and college recruiting. So in the States, that's a big business as far as college scholarships and such. I started selling there, not knowing what I was doing, and I figured out who I was as far as kind of a left to right process. And who would know that if you have a process and you work really hard, you can start to be successful, and everything blossomed there.
Yeah, if you worked really hard, and you've got some sort of process to follow, which I guess is really. So I'll bring this onto a conversation about great salespeople in a minute, which is something I really wanted to focus on, because I know you've got some really good experience and views to share there. But if we just drill into leadership a little bit there, because you've got a pretty big team of people that you're responsible for running. So I'd be interested in your views on leadership. What is leadership for you?
Leadership. I can't imagine how many definitions of leadership there are. I would boil it down to this. If you have a strong point of view and the audience around that point of view is understanding that and they're following you, then you're a leader. Most times, leadership starts about all times without a title. It's usually someone that has a really strong point of view around an area. I'll give you an example. I wasn't planning on telling this story, but I'll tell it now. And I got made fun of for some of my peers, but it's relevant. When I was an AE, and I first joined Salesforce back in 2011, I didn't make club my first year, and I was angry. I'd come, I'd always make club. I was always successful. I didn't make it. Now, granted, Salesforce was just open in Chicago and there was a lot of new people. So what I did when everybody went to club that week, I started a get to club club. And I was an AE, Army of One. And I got made fun of because of the title of that. But 16 of us, we met monthly. Some managers were in there. A lot of us were AEs. And we just went around the room. We talked about, what was working, what wasn't working. But we did it every single month. And 15 of those 16 people made club the next year. Now, I got into leadership a few years after that, official leadership, but I had a strong point of view of what we wanted to do. And if you have a strong point of view, and as you go up in leadership, you have multiple points of view around what you need to get done. It could be sales management, it could be deal management, it could be more strategic than that. But that's what you do at younger in your career. You start to gain points of view.
That group you were talking about, I think it's such an interesting story. Was that was a group of 15 or 16 account executives?
We had about 3 managers in there as well.
Right. Okay. And it was just sort of open. So this will bring us on to another topic I want to touch on later, which is tears. Well, let's do that now. Let me chuck this one at you. Often sales leaders will say to me, I had one quite recently actually, when I was sort of debating this particular point of view. Salespeople in our world generally individually quoted and remunerated. So they don't have a shared goal as such, do they? They're paid against. Is it still possible to build that into a team?
So, yes. A team, the way I define team is we all have the same values, which is important. We may have, and more importantly, we should have different experiences and different skill sets, but we should have the same values. So we're all pointing in the same direction. Yes, the competition itself is the binder of the team. And, we talk about coaching, and there's sort of 3 areas of coaching. There's the skills coaching, which is the most prominent. There is the performance coaching, which is the most popular. Peer-to-peer coaching is what doesn't get talked about. Peer-to-peer coaching is where the glue of the team happens. I learned more from my peers that were way better than me than I did from anybody. And we got to know each other. We became extremely good friends. Not everybody, but a lot of the people, but we were all friendly. We rooted for each other, but we also, we quietly wanted to be the top person, and we would compete. But there's different forms of team. Just because maybe I'm going to use another American sports analogy, but a basketball team, you have to pass to each other. You're not necessarily passing to each other on a sales team, but you're feeding off each other, learning from each other. And that's a different form of a team.
It is. Yeah, I love that, actually. I agree with you. I've learned a ton of stuff from people that I still do. I learn a lot from the people I coach and mentor. I think that's the particular thing that we don't actually understand about coaching is that, it's a two-way street. It feels sometimes like people don't really get that. Of course, you've got a lot of experience because you're a big sports enthusiast, a lot of experience there. Do you think the concept of coaching in sales is well understood as it is in sports, or are we still?
Not at all. I think that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit out there that could be picked. Coaching is hard because you want to do it at the moment. Said earlier, there's a lot of performance coaching that goes on, like, hey, these are your numbers from last month or last quarter, and sort of reading the news to the person that they already know the news to. And, that can't go away, but it's not necessarily impactful other than sort of a loose threat. I think the skills coaching can be worked on quite a bit. How do we, as an example, how do we get better at deal management? How do we prospecting? How do we get better at discovery? How do we get better at deal execution? Those are kind of 4 areas, by the way, that I focus on. But as a leader, you have to programize and operationalize that. And that's very difficult to take time out of your week and to think about, and more importantly, be disciplined and consistent about.
We'll come back to that in a second. Great topics. I think as a leader, you mentioned one thing which is really important. For sure, you don't have to have a formal job title of leader to be a leader. One thing you do need is, as you say, I think a point of view and followers. If you don't have followers, you're not a leader. But I believe there are three main levers that you can play, or three cards you can play as a leader. Culture, which is about people, strategy, which is about planning, and execution, which is about process. If you were starting a new role as a senior sales leader, which one of those would you, let's say you'd move to a new, I'm sure you're not going to move, but let's say you move to a new position within your current employer. Which one of those would you start with?
Well, number one is culture, hands down.
Mm-hmm.
The way I define culture, by the way, we talk a lot about words that if we don't stop and try to define them personally, they may lose their meaning. Culture is one of those words. Grit is another one we can get to later. But culture, to me, the way I look at it, within a group, it is the collective of actions and behaviors that are deemed positive or deemed negative.
Yep.
Well, culture, what actions and behaviors does your group do? What do they do? From the tactical side, it could be everybody shows up and make sure that their operator is where it needs to be, the next steps and their notes and all the fun stuff that we do as salespeople. On the other side of that, it could be a general attitude. We don't, we forecast accuracy of our group is stellar. And we work extremely hard to do that. Everybody's on the same page. But if you don't have a culture that's defined, that you're leading that culture and leading from the front, then all the other stuff, the strategy and the execution, none of that really matters because it's failure to launch.
Do you think the leaders have to be at the front, or can they be some way behind the lines?
Depends on the personality. Everybody's got their own style. And just because you're quiet doesn't mean you're from behind. And just because you're loud doesn't mean you're in front. I think we get wrapped up in personality traits. I don't know. I can't really, when I say leading from the front, is you're setting the major milestone tones of the business, of your org, culture being one of them, as we talked about. And you're setting that vision and culture. Now, to me, the way that engine continues, and this can be stylistic, depending on your style, and this is the Achilles heel for every sales leader, is consistency and discipline around that consistency. I've worked on that for 20 years. How can I be more consistent, and how can I have discipline around that consistency week in and week out, or month in and month out, whatever the cadence is, around these 3 or 4 or 5 areas going to move the needle. And once I can do that, whether I'm leading from the back or leading from the front or leading from the side, and again, that's based on my personality or your personality, that doesn't really matter as much as long as that's in place.
How do you think your team would describe your leadership style, Joe?
I would say I am very to the point. I'm very clear on expectations. I would hope they would say I'm at least halfway empathetic. And, I consider myself a cheerleader, player's coach in a lot of ways. But at the same time, there is no gray area with me. But I'm not insulting. I'm never mean. I'm never sarcastic, unless we're on the same page. That's a no-no.
Yeah.
But I'm very clear.
Candid. Direct and to the point. Okay. Well, let's drill into the specialist topic for this call, shall we? Well, I say the specialist topic because it's one that I've been fascinated about for a long time. What is it you think makes a great salesperson in the B2B SaaS space today?
I mean, there's a lot. I'll distill them down to a few. A few years ago, I wrote an article for HBR that talked about some of these things. I'll mention those. I'm going to add in a few more. I think number one, and these are in order as far as I'm concerned. Number one is ownership. As a salesperson, you have to own your success. It's more of an attitude. I say this to my kids. I say this to myself. I say this to my team. Just because it's not your fault doesn't mean it's not your responsibility. There's a lot of things out of someone's control. But if you have that inner monologue inside of you that says, look, no matter what, I'm going to find success. No matter what, I'm going to own my success. Miracles and luck miraculously start to happen. And those are the people that are always at the top of the dashboard, year in and year out, quarter in and quarter out. So number one is total ownership of your success. Number two, and this sort of bleeds into the first one, but it just deserves its own category, is resourcefulness. I joked in that article, there was a TV show when I was in 5th grade called MacGyver, and it was a silly show about a guy that basically was in a ridiculous situation, and all he had was a paperclip and maybe a blowtorch, and he had to work his way out of it against 15 different people. And
it played over here. I remember it. It's great. Yeah, it was. I think we
didn't know the end of there.
We would. No, we did. That's a very good reference. We describe it as a bit cheesy, I think, if you know what that means.
I do.
Yeah, but in a good way.
100%. If we watched it again today, it'd be extremely cheesy. But I couldn't help but think of that show when, we're, like I said, arbitrary obstacles pop up at the beginning and especially at the end of a deal cycle. There is no playbook for most of what we have to deal with. So the people that have that sort of attitude or skill set of resourcefulness, as an example, those are the ones that find a way. And it goes back to the attitude and total ownership. But again, I've seen people have that, but they just don't have that skill of like, hey, what if we tried this, and this? What if we whiteboarded all of this? What if we tried this? That's the way that at the end of it, for that last 2 or 3 major deals that some people get and some people don't, that's the difference maker. Number 3, and I hit on this earlier, number 3 is expertise, especially in tech. Now we have solution engineers and architects and things and people like that validate our technology, and they're wonderful, extremely smart people to work with. But you as an AE, you have to understand the language at minimum. You have to understand, more importantly, what the tech does to the business. You're the ultimate conduit, the ultimate liaison, the ultimate translator of what we do and why it matters to you as a customer. And you have to be able to convey that. And you can convey that successfully. You can, develop a strong point of view, as we mentioned earlier. You start to garner trust, and all of a sudden you're in front of executives, or you're where you need to go, or your deal accelerates. So a lot of people wonder, like, why can't I accelerate my deal, or why can't I get in front of executives? It's because you have no point of view, or it's limited. You have to work on that. The same way that an attorney practices law, the same way that a doctor practices medicine, as a salesperson, you have to practice your craft on a regular basis and have a strong point of view. Number 4 is altruism. This is more observational. The best people I've ever seen are the ones that help the people that are either younger in their career or new to the company. They answer lots of questions. They're always there, whether they want to or not, they do it. And they don't do it for anything other than that's just their nature. Ironically, by helping others, they get better themselves. They show up in their night. But observationally, I see a lot of people that are at the top are always helping others. I'll add 2 more that I haven't written about in the past or really thought as strong about, but more recently. The best AEs have a system. They are extremely disciplined around that system. There is no negotiating with themselves. Whether it's, hey, I'm going to knock out 40 calls before 9 a.m., and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this every single week, and then I'm going to look at the results at the end of the quarter, and they're always at the top. But they have some sort of system, and they have to find a system that works for them, but more importantly, is consistent. And the last piece I'll say is the best AEs are the best storytellers. And storytelling is an aggregate of lots and lots of experience and knowledge, and just listening within your organization, being able to convey a story and say, look, I understand your situation. Here's another customer that did this. They had that same problem. This is how we solve that. That is extremely powerful. It's very difficult to do. It takes time. But if those sort of 6 areas are what I look for from a salesperson.
Well, that's a ton, isn't it, of stuff there. Thank you for sharing that. Deep insights, I think, based upon your experience. Is it possible to detect these qualities during the hiring process?
It's hard.
I would have thought so. Huh?
Hiring's hard.
Mm.
Hiring, when you start hiring, I haven't thought about this in a while, but you can go through the motion very easily because there's no checks and there's no balances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you can want that person to be hired because you need somebody quickly without going through the rigor of making sure you're going through all the steps and you're asking the hard questions because you don't want to know those. You don't want to get bad answers. You want to get good answers because you're rooting for those people. So hiring is a whole nother discussion, I think, that I think about quite a bit, and I want to coach my team on, but I get coaching as well. I'm not a perfect hirer. I've been lucky and I've been careless in the past. And that's something that I want to continue to get better at.
I remember a boss once said to me a couple of years ago, don't rush in to make that hire. I think you probably heard this phrase before. No breath is better than bad breath. Which I think is true, although I've been in roles like yours where I've been under pressure to fill a role because if we didn't fill it, the head count would go away. And there's always that inclination, isn't there? But it's important to get the right people in. So half of your job is got to get the best people. And then, the best people you can get at any one moment in time, depending on whatever market conditions there are. And then you've got to focus on getting the best out of them. So how much time do you spend on the latter, do you think, yourself? Because I sense that you're a natural coach from a business and a sports point of view. And there's obviously quite a bit of interplay between both of those, because I think selling's a competitive sport myself. So how much time do you spend in the development side with your team?
So put a percentage on it, I would say at least a quarter of my time.
Right. Which is a big chunk, actually.
It's important.
Yeah.
But it's intimidating too, especially when you're managing managers that manage other managers. These people are professionals. These people have been around the block, not too, maybe more than you and maybe just a little less than you.
Yeah.
So you have to balance that out. But at the same time, you've got to take command as well. And you're in this position for a reason. So, when you're an early manager, your confidence is going to be tested.
Yeah.
Quite a bit. But you have to rely on, you're here for a reason. You rely on a lot of your successes and some of the things that got you here. And you're not always going to be right, but you're going to be right a larger portion of the time. And when you're not right, you're going to learn from it.
Yeah. I think that's the important thing, isn't it? That you take time to reflect. I don't know whether you're able to do that in your busy working day. Do you get time to reflect on, or is it just back-to-back Zoom calls now from one customer, one opportunity to the next?
No, not anymore. Was for years and years and years. Of years, I've been able to look at my calendar, the power of saying no, to be on a meeting every hour of the day. And sometimes I am, but during the week, there's got to be a time where I need to reflect. If I can't be working always in the business, I have to work on the business, and you can't work on the business if you're in meetings all day.
Let's drill into that a little bit. I love that. So can you explain the difference, Joe, between working in the business and working on the business?
So when I work in the business, that's the natural thing. You got here because you worked hard.
Mm-hmm.
Here because you were successful. The way you were successful because you worked hard. So it's a cycle. So the natural thing to do is to fill your calendar. I want to be on this meeting. I want to be in this meeting, et cetera, et cetera. But if no one is looking, 50 feet ahead or, a year ahead or a quarter ahead, then we're going to be heads down. We may be going the wrong direction. So as a third line leader, especially, and any leader needs to be doing this. I would say at least a day a month, and I minimize my meetings. I may have one or two, in the morning or in the afternoon or whatever it may be, but the rest of the time is thinking. And that's the best advice I think I ever got as I was promoted, is take some time to think. Think about what's working, look at the data, turn off your Slack, I wouldn't say turn off your phone, but that's crazy talk, but don't go that far. But look back and reflect of what's working, analyze the data, and then come out of that with a stronger point of view of kind of where we were and more importantly, where we're going. But that's difficult to do. It's not natural to do that.
No, step back from it. I was reminded you were talking about, we might be going in the wrong direction. Have you read the 7 Habits book from Stephen Covey?
I have skimmed it in the past.
Yeah, he talks, there's a couple of constructs in there that are relevant, I think, to the conversation. He talks about having the ladder on the wrong wall. I mean, you can be climbing a ladder, very busy in the business. But if you're on the business, you make sure it's on the right wall. Otherwise, you're going fast upwards in the wrong direction. I think that's important. And the other point you made actually about time management, I think you were kind of alluding to, carving time out to make sure you've got time to work on the business. So important. That's what Covey used to call a quadrant 2 in the time management. Important, but not urgent. Really important stuff.
That probably, all the things that I just talked about was probably from a more well-read senior person that gave that to me.
Yeah, but you see, you've learned and you've absorbed it, haven't you? So let's toggle back to these great salespeople then. How many really great salespeople do you think you've met in your career?
I'd say quite a few. It's the people that are extremely impressive.
Mm-hmm.
I've had the luxury of working for some really great companies, but from a technique standpoint, from a process standpoint, from a wow, I can't believe you just did that or asked that question standpoint, and just the boldness. I mean, there's people that I've respected over the years, that especially the ones that have skills I don't have or attributes I don't have. I mean, I don't know the number, but I would say at least 50.
Yeah. It's a big number. It's a big number. Do you think of those 50 that a lot of them are naturally talented?
I don't even know what that means. And the reason I say that is, I mean, everybody's naturally good at something or natural at something. I think that the rate and the pace of how you get better based on experience is probably the difference maker. Maybe that's how I would interpret that.
Mm. You mean learning from your mistakes, I guess, right? To a degree.
Learning from your mistakes. I mean, that's the difference between, people say smart or maybe less smart. Like, everybody kind of starts in a similar place, but they learn, especially in sales. I mean, there's sales degrees now, but when we were coming up, there's no sales degrees. And I don't know how powerful those are. I've never been around those, but everybody kind of starts at the same pace. Now, some people have a bold personality where they're comfortable being uncomfortable, and they're disciplined and they work hard. Those are people that generally are most successful, but they could be extremely raw. I've seen them raw. And, the faster they get better from call to call or engagement to engagement, that's the difference maker. The people that can't, for instance, I always say that, they don't pay us for the yeses, they pay us for the nos. And most people can't take the nos. They can't take the emotional piece of that. And the people that just sort of just go to the other side and just don't care, those are the people that are extremely successful. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I'm just...
No, I think you are. Well, you're talking a lot about, I think a lot of what you're talking about is attitude here. Now, I'm a great believer that I think, my view is that actually you're right. I don't think there's a special set of talents for selling, because selling is a skill. But I do think the highly successful salespeople are in tune with what they're naturally good at, and they tend to play to their strengths. I've fundamentally seen that relationship between understanding your talents and applying them with skills, but having the right attitude somewhere in the middle. These are the components I think that make up long-term success for salespeople.
Yeah, I think let's put a point on that, and I referred to the term grit earlier.
Yeah, I wonder if we can drill into that a bit, because I think that fits into the bucket of attitudes in my kind of model of what makes a great seller.
Yeah, it's a popular word. Way I look at grit is I read this definition at some point somewhere, but a daily passion and perseverance for long-term goals. Knowing that there's no satisfaction tomorrow or today or next week, but maintaining that discipline every day for long-term goals. And that's, when you put it that way, it's extremely hard to do that. And maybe that's the question. Maybe that's the answer to your question. Is that embedded in someone's character or their personality? I don't know. But it seems that way.
I think we can develop it. I think you can become more resilient once you understand how to build resilience. And there's something that you can definitely gain. There's no question about that. You've been selling, managing salespeople, leading sales managers, observing salespeople for a few years, haven't you? What do you think in the world of selling, professional selling, if you like, Joe? What do you think has changed in the past 20 years?
Great question. I would say in the last 5 years, and I'll go the last 5 and the last 10.
Mm-hmm.
I started.
So you're refusing to answer my question. You're pushing it. I love that. I love that. Change it. What you're doing now, you're doing the challenger sale. You're taking control of the conversation, Joe.
Yeah, it's better. No, it's a great question. When I first started selling, we were just coming out of an era where it was more personality, it was more feature focused, and more just sort of barraging. And technology, I was in consumer technology, so it was a bit different. I switched over to B2B in 2011, but I've seen both sides of it. And to me, my generation, I don't think understood that as well. Maybe we didn't have, sort of that. I wasn't that typical salesperson that was, full of personality and, the center of the room or any of that nature. I was process person. And a lot of people that were around me, and maybe they said they were, I don't know, but like they were like that as well. So when I was coming up, it was less about an unorganized approach, but extremely personality focused and likability. Those were all major strengths of salespeople, and they got the deals done. And I think it started switching over to sort of a process approach. And as I got into tech, tech became extremely competitive in the mid sort of 2013, 2014 companies like Salesforce were extremely successful. Obviously Microsoft had been successful for a long time, SAP, Oracle, but all these other companies started to branch off. So there's a lot of different options that came online and hit the market. So with a lot of different options, and especially with people understanding those options, you had to differentiate yourself. All of a sudden we had to start, with a different technique of business cases. Business cases weren't, pervasive at that point. The top people have always done them, but they weren't pervasive around everybody else. The sort of MAP, mutual action plan or mutual evaluation plan, that wasn't a thing until probably 2015, across the board. Level selling, executive selling, multiple stakeholders. Prospecting became more difficult. It went from, I think, three different touches to I think now 15 touches to get a prospect on the phone. People don't buy things for features anymore as they used to. The budgets are strict. The CFO is extremely involved now. The CFO is more operational than ever before, as they should be. So you have to make sure you're across all stakeholders. Everything is almost, this is another sports analogy that may fall on deaf ears, but you have to pitch a perfect game, especially in today's economy.
That's baseball. I know that much.
There you go. Yeah.
There you go.
27 up and 27 down. There you go. But you have to be really, really precise and really, really good at everything. And you're not going to get deals done based on, either your personality. Not that everybody did that, but it evolved. It's evolved since then. But I've seen.
Well, really thorough answer. You've got a pretty demanding job, don't you? What time do you tend to start work in the morning?
I'm in my office around 7:15.
7:15. Wow. Okay.
I'll give you a but.
Mm-hmm.
But 7:15, 7:20. I work till about 8:30. Coffee, administrative things. I have some one-on-ones that my team loves at that time. and just get things out of the way. I look at the numbers and reports and just make sure the foundation of the day is set. Look at the calendar. I go to the gym 8:30. I'm not a gym guy. I go every day, but I'm only there for 45 minutes, just because I'm not that good at the gym. But I go every day for 45 minutes, non-negotiable. And then I'm back home, and I either have a 9:30 or I have a 10 o'clock. And then most days I've got, depending on the day, I've got this, that, or the other. But go from there. So I'm not I wish I had that discipline of getting up at 5 a.m. or 5:30. I've surrendered to that. I don't have it. But I am there every day. And I think that the gym, along with a few other things, that has really helped me with my career, as far as getting your body where it needs to go and that kind of thing. So, and that's more of a sort of a post-COVID type thing that I was not near as disciplined.
And what do you do to unwind at the end of a busy day?
Well, if I'm here, not on the road, I'm with my kids, my wife. I have an 8 to 6-year-old daughters. They've got all kinds of stories from the day. So I am there, most of the time with a glass of wine. And that's how we unwind. We always have dinner together almost every night, unless we have activities, but that's a discipline as well. That's a non-negotiable for us as well. But that's a typical day. If I'm on the road, who knows? There is no unwinding.
Well, we've got time for one last question. The Sales Code Leadership Podcast famous one last question. What's the one thing you wish you knew at the beginning of your career that you picked up along the way, Joe?
Wow. That's a big question. Yeah. If I could go back to me when I was 22 or 23, without disrupting the space-time continuum, I'm sure what would happen there. But if I could do that, I would say, look, all this hard work is going to pay off. The 8 days a week that you're working, the coaching sessions that you're getting that are extremely uncomfortable, that will help you. The failures and the successes, all of everything that you're doing on a day-by-day basis, that is leading to something. And you're going to wake up, and it's going to be 20 years from now, and you're going to have a completely different vantage point. And you're going to look back in the last 20 years, you're going to look forward for the next 20 years, and it's going to matter. So everything you're doing today matters, whether you know it or not. That's what I would tell myself.
Well, that's great advice. That's great advice. There'll be people building their careers, moving into their first sales management leadership role that'll really benefit from listening to this podcast. Joe, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for your time.
You got it. My pleasure. And thank you so much, Kevin.
And thank you to the listener. Please do give us a review if you like what you hear, because it helps to boost the listenership.